we're going to kick it off. So first off, welcome everyone. We're going to do this session a little bit differently, and I'm really excited to kind of experiment with you all. So a couple things. Of course, first I want to welcome Evan. It's going to be incredible to watch his expertise and action solving some of your problems. I'm very excited about this approach. But also, I think Evan's going to jump into just some framework building as necessary as we kind of get through this. And then, most importantly, as always, because we're trying a little new format, I absolutely want feedback that one we can use to improve some of our programming overall. And then I'm sure Evan would like to hear from you all as well. So
Definitely.
there you go. So if you're here, then you promise to do both. One is participate, engage, and then to also give very good feedback because that's an important thing. So we'll jump right in. Evan LaPointe, the man who needs no introduction, JD Vance lookalike from my perspective, and I know a lot of people have said that before. But honestly, it's been has just become a dear friend over time now. So thank you, Evan. I believe this is the second or third event you're doing with Sidebar because every time we chat, he's like, it's the best group of people coming together, want to do amazing things. And he's always here to kind of push us in ways that are interesting, different, just like out of the box. So I've personally enjoyed Evan's, of course, amazing work that you see on his Maven courses and how he tries to teach all those fun things. But it's really just looking inside how the best asset each one of us has and how it operates, right? To really push it to max performance. So the brain, science of the brain, all of that thing is what I geek out about with Evan. But today we're going to actually jump into how to just better tell your stories to land to the audience that you want to get to. So that's what we'll be live solving. I'm going to hand it over to Evan. He's going to chat a little bit. But then we have three amazing volunteers who are actually working through some challenges right now, who are going to come live, talk us through their challenges. We're going to practice some bottom lining skills, which is a very common sidebar concept, which is like, how can you very crisply articulate the challenge you're trying to solve, and then how Evan's going to like live problem solve it with you. Does that sound like a plan? Incredible. Okay. So welcome, Evan. It is amazing to have you back with this wonderful crew. And I know we would love to continually have you over and over and over again. But let's jump right in. I see Michelle. Michelle, hi. Why don't you come off mute, introduce yourself, and then we'll give you exactly 90 seconds to state your problem. If you can make it even more crisper, better, everything, and then we'll see this action in progress. I'm going to go ahead and highlight you if that makes sense.
Sure. Let's
Okay.
do it. So hey everyone, I'm Michelle. Currently seeking a product leadership role. The challenge that I'm experiencing is that although I've been building products since about 2007, please don't do calculations regarding my age. I have only recently had a product role for about 3.5 years, a leadership role that was dedicated exclusively to product. I've done a lot of other jobs around sales and marketing and led in those areas as well, which I think is honestly a strength. But when it comes to interviewing, I think a lot of companies these days are looking for deep domain level expertise in one particular area and to see a particular growth through PM, senior PM, director level. And so it's challenging right now to explain my value and the product work that I've done, even though I haven't held those titles explicitly throughout the last X number of years.
Cool. Well, just to preface before I jump into solutioning here, I want to kind of put a few ideas out. First and foremost, each of these three cases we're going to go through probably is at least it's probably a very common thread among everybody here who's faced a situation like that. So I'm going to try, Michelle, to answer the question, not just in a personal Michelle way, but in a broader way that more people can benefit from. So just kind of know that going in, and then maybe we can wrap things up in each of these 15-minute blocks with more specifics. Sorry about my dog. The work from home challenges that we face. But we can wrap up with some really high fidelity detail. And then the other thing here is, like Shaya mentioned, I do have two Maven courses. We're going to borrow from both of these courses as we talk today. One of them is about how to sell yourself and your ideas, essentially influence and relationship building, meant for when you're in the role. And there's a separate course on interview mastery. It's called The Science of Hired. And it looks at how the hiring team's brains are working as they're interviewing candidates and what that means for you as an interviewer. So, with all the work that I do, I try to reverse engineer strategies from how the brain works, not from experimentation in theory. And the difference there is a lot of people like you, there are plenty of courses you could take on hiring, and they're all going to say, "Oh, these things tend to work better than these things," and then you say, "Why?" And they're like, "Because magic." And I don't love that answer. I'd rather say the brain on the other side of the Zoom or the room is evaluating me, what's happening inside of their brain, what needs to occur. And in your case, Michelle, we'll talk exactly about that right now. And what does that mean for my strategy, what I need to do? Okay. So in your case, I think you mentioned that you've kind of had a hodgepodge of different experiences. And one of the key challenges is that you don't have like the specific experience they're looking for through your whole career for a long period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of more of a mixed bag rather than a clear progression.
Yeah, exactly. And when you have a mixed bag situation, what's happening in people's brains as they're interviewing you is overwhelmingly human beings use pattern recognition to understand what's true and untrue about people and about situations. Pattern recognition comes from a part of the brain called the hippocampus. So I'll give you an example right now. I need everybody in the room to not think of anything in Paris. Okay? Your brain, your hippocampus, automatically recalls things. And not only will it recall references like this, yeah, croissants. Not only will it's an interesting test to see if people think of food, buildings, people, like what what is it? But not only will it pattern match and find associations, it'll also figure out if things seem to resolve. So if you're saying in the person's brain, can I see a person who hasn't spent their entire career in this being good at this versus the other candidate we experienced who has a long career, which of those two patterns it feels more powerful to the interviewer? The better match, if we were like scoring the level of match between two things in a pattern, they would match higher. And many of you have probably gotten feedback after the end of an interview that we went with the person with more experience, we went with the person with who's been in our industry and you're in a different industry and so on. These are all people sharing with you the patterns that they overvalued in the selection process. Does that make sense? So
Totally.
what we're going to do is we're going to blow their brain up and not in a way that's going to hurt. We have to match patterns to feel safe to people, but we also, and that kind of puts us in the category like interview candidates. Let's say they're interviewing 100 people. There's going to be a pool of immediate rejections because they're fitting anti-patterns. They came across as awkward, they were poorly dressed, they were inarticulate, they weren't clear in their communication, they didn't seem very strategic, all these types of things. So we don't want to hit any anti-patterns. And before you interview, you should be thinking about what anti-patterns might they have in their head. You don't need to do research, just use your mind. You are smart enough to really be like, "Oh, I bet this is, industry is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem." And if you have some of those anti-patterns, you can address them productively. You also want to fit certain positive patterns in their mind. So, want to tell stories that activate positive patterns, and that puts you not in the bubble of rejects, but in the bubble of anonymous, but maybe. And there's a big group of people that interview that when they get to the selection process, they've forgotten your name because you look too much like the other people that were the maybes. So now we have to re-differentiate ourselves. So it's kind of like we need to look enough like what you're looking for, and once we achieve that, we need to look different than everybody else. Because your job in an interview is not to pass their test, it's to win the contest. You are not actually interviewing about the job, you're interviewing against the other candidates. You need to be the outlier for positive reasons. So the way we're going to explode their brain is that we are going to transfer the discussion they want to have about your knowledge, your skills, and your experience into a discussion about how your mind works and what kind of person you are and what kind of character you have. And that becomes a very interesting and very differentiated conversation. So instead of explaining, I worked at Google for 3 years and did the following projects, now we're saying, I wanted to share a little bit with you about how my mind approached these projects at Google that were really challenging and why the way I think lended itself to the success we had. And that's a conversation they're not used to having, which is inherently differentiating. But it's also one that can kind of walk through, who is this person? Who is Michelle? Oh, wow. And Michelle thinks in a certain way, especially when you think in rare ways. If you're a really compassionate person, for example, you are a better product person than people who are not compassionate because you're thinking about other people, users, customers all the time when other people are not concerned with people's needs. So that's an inherent advantage when you share your mind. Oh, I was drawn to product because I'm actually a very unusually highly compassionate person, and that's enabled me to see things other people miss and get things right that other people miss, and has led to higher CSAT, higher NPS, higher this than the people I competed with who clearly just didn't care about the customer nearly as much as I did. You see where we're going with this? We're taking it to character and to your mind, and we're keeping it safe, but we're kind of disconnecting from the knowledge, skills, experience, careers, jobs, roles, etc., and talking about why you were successful in them, not whether you did them or not. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So much more to learn in the course and things like that, but we need to kind of go through a three-step process. Manage anti-patterns, step one, because the brain assesses for safety first. If you do not appear safe, you get rejected by a brain. So if you do have some anti-patterns, like you haven't been in the industry, you can say, I'm really excited to get into this industry because my experience in this other industry translates really well in the following ways. And I've noticed this industry struggles a lot with ABC. This industry I'm coming out of actually is really good at those things. So if you want to be an outlier, this translates to that. And now you're taking the anti-pattern and turning it into a positive pattern. And then my role in customer success lends itself to product in this way, or my role in product lends itself to coaching this way, or you're trying to kind of cross-pollinate, but safety is the objective of step one. And then you get to step two, which is positive patterns. Any ammo you have to use in strengthening using patterns. And then step three, let's shatter your concept of patterns altogether by talking about my mind instead of my experience. So
Love
you
it.
probably have you noticed at all, if we look back at some of these, have you noticed at all that maybe some of these steps are steps that you haven't been taking and solidifying with these interviews that haven't been going well?
I think probably leaning more into fitting the positive patterns. Like I think the anti patterns are always things we think most about, right? Like what are the reasons why someone wouldn't hire me? But translating that into positive patterns, like having a really good story about why having led in sales and marketing translates really well into how I approach product. And then having that through line come into, and this is therefore why I think differently from other product leaders because
Hmm.
of that background rather than despite of, right?
Yeah. Well, in this field, and I spent a lot of time in the data and analytics field too. What these two fields have in common is they're very influence-based fields. And what happens in influence-based fields instead of like direct fields, sales guys go out, get customers. That is a form of influence, but it's very different than kind of the internal machine influence. And in influence-centric roles, generally speaking, there's low success rates with people being exceptional leaders and contributors in those spaces. So in the analytics world, more than 90% of leaders are leaders that you'd be like, that was okay. I mean, they made it work. But if you could ask, like, did you, from the last person in this role, in this product leadership role, in this analytics leadership role, did you find them really inspiring, really innovative, really visionary, etc.? Knowing that the statistics are on your side, asking this question, And they'll probably say, no, it didn't feel that innovative or whatever. And you go, well, that's why the anti-pattern is so valuable to you. You don't want a lookalike from a field of people who don't get it right, right? Like it's like a garden that has all rotten vegetables. You like, don't you want to farm out of a different garden than the one that has all the rotten vegetables in it? So use these anti-patterns, but use them enthusiastically. Like a lot of people go in with imposter syndrome and insecurity that, oh, I haven't been in your industry, so I'm not ready. No, don't have those thoughts in your head. Instead, walk in with the thoughts that my anti-patterns are the solution to the pattern problems you have. You actually want an anti-pattern. And that'll make you stick way out and take you to the part where your mind is the most important thing to talk about.
I like that.
Thanks for bringing this up. This is a great use case that probably everybody can relate to. And if you do, I'm not here to shill my wares, but if you do, this Maven course has been really good for people. It's ended up being very highly rated out of the first few cohorts. So it's a much deeper dive into the underlying frameworks and how to deeply understand what's actually happening in the interview process so that you can be more strategic, not just to kind of survive the line of questions, but to actually master the overall ecosystem that you're a part of in that process. So thanks a lot, Michelle. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Evan.
Amazing. This was awesome. I completely agree. I just love that anti-pattern, but showing up enthusiastically to like really own that narrative. I think it's going to be amazing. Michelle, thank you so much. I appreciate you, coining your challenge, bottom lining it. I love all of that. And thanks, Evan. Let's move to Vic. Vic, I'm going to go ahead and bring you on stage, I guess, whatever the equivalent of Zoom version is. But now I have to find you. Where are you, Vic? There you go. I see you. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Okay. Same. Great timing on the first challenge, both of you. We'll try and see if we can stick to the same one. So, Vic, take it away. Bottom line, your challenge, and it is a slightly interesting, different, but still very relatable topic. So, I'm going to hand it over to you, Vic.
Absolutely. So my topic is about internal visibility. So what I've written is I'm known as the get shit done guy, the one who quietly makes things work even without formal authority. But that work often isn't visible to leadership, even after sharing it quite often and widely. And with constant reorgs, I keep having to prove myself and resell myself. So, how do I position myself as not only being seen as reliable, but also valuable to what the leadership is looking for and not constantly starting over and over?
Yeah, it's a great case, Vic. A tough one, and especially when you are like you come across as a friendly, humble person. I do a lot of my coaching with friendly, humble people, and a lot of humble people feel like it's automatically obnoxious to not maximize their humility. So we need to explore that space a little bit here, and that's one of a few components that I'd love to talk about, but it's a really important one because it's the throttle limiter for the whole thing, right? Like you're going to be capped at your willingness to act. And humility you can think of as the cap for a lot of people, or imposter syndrome for some people can feel like the cap and things like that. So what we need to understand here is so in the we're going to draw instead of from the interview mastery course, we're going to draw from the how to sell yourself in your ideas course here. And that course is about influence and the relationship between the macro concept of selling yourself as a professional and the relationships that form there, and then the micro concept of iteratively selling ideas. And the metaphorical kind of anchoring of that course is that relationships actually establish what we call platforms. A platform is essentially permission for you to sell ideas, for you to ask for meetings, for you to make comments, offer feedback, ask critical questions, etc. And you may have noticed that many professionals lack a platform. So I mentioned the analytics industry that I spent a lot of time in. The analytics industry is, let's say, 100,000 people with jobs where 99,000 aren't allowed to do their jobs because they don't have the platforms. Analytics is about asking challenging questions. It is about showing where mistakes are. It is about pointing out optimization opportunities, and all of those things create political issues, which either means we head right into them and get burned, or we avoid them to stay appealing and keep kind of the social piece, and therefore don't create value. And that's because analytics professionals are abysmal at selling themselves and creating the platform that would allow them to do their job. So product people are much better because the topic is a little more palatable than data that tells everybody how bad they are at their jobs. So that's kind of an inherently more appealing field. But here are a couple ideas that would help us pick this apart. When I talk in the course about your brand, your personal brand, that everybody's got a concept of you in their heads, whether you think of personal brand as pure cheesiness or embrace it or not, it's a very real thing. So you might as well treat it like a very real thing. And the way a personal brand works is at some point in a relationship, you will tell people who you are, just like we talked about with Michelle. You will explain to people your skills, your mentality, uh, and they'll kind of it's like conversation. It could just be like a let's grab lunch conversation. Or if you're a manager of people, it's like the day you start the job, you meet with the team and talk to them about who you are, how you think, how you work, etc. And if you handle that well, you've essentially planted some seeds in people's minds that then you can nurture from that point forward. And then you're going to start having shared experiences working with people. And then the actual brand will start to form in their minds. So what you tell them, they may not even believe you the first day, especially if you're in a field with a lot of stereotypes or in an organization with a lot of kind of inertia behind people's brands. And, we all, if I said the word engineer, you've already thought of a prototype of an engineer personality. So if an engineer meets you and explains to you the first time they meet how differently they work than most people, that's going to be a cool experience to hear, but you might not believe them yet. And those shared experiences are going to start unfolding over the coming weeks and months. And then that brand solidifies based on your track record. What humble people do is they say, I just want my work to speak for itself. So we don't have that conversation on the front end. We just know that we're going to have these shared experiences and these touch points. And we hope that that will eventually accumulate into a brand that accurately reflects us. The problem is most people, especially if they're not a lot like you, are not nearly intuitive enough to properly understand you at all through that process. They're constantly questioning your motives. They're constantly cross-referencing incentives. They're constantly pattern matching you wrongly to other people because you've never established with any clarity what you're actually like, that these experiences can pattern match into and fit the narrative. Does that make sense? So we're going to use a tool from the course. The course does cover both selling ourselves and our ideas. I think one of the tools that helps more humble people get a little more assertive is to start embracing the idea of selling more ideas. So if you're a get shit done guy, a lot of times get shit done guys don't ever sell the idea, they just go do the idea. And if you don't sell it, it's kind of like Batman, but nobody even knows there is Batman. Right? You got to show up in the newspaper every now and then. And the easiest way to do that is to, with critical relationships, do the selling of yourself, very similar to what we explained to Michelle. And again, the course is really rich. I'll share what I can in the 12 or 15 minutes that I have here. But it's about moving people from the skill set to the mindset. Here's how my mind works. Here's what my personality is like. Here's what I'm intrinsically motivated to do. Here's what I'm willing to put resilience and effort into doing. And that kind of helps people get your character in their head. So you have that first conversation casually. Just take somebody to lunch, go meet with people, ask them to go first and share how they think, and then tell them how you think. And then when you sell your ideas, you want to go in and be more proactive to say, okay, not only do I want to get something done, but I want to explain to you why it's valuable, why it's relevant, etc. And you just tack on this little bit of front end effort to the getting shit done mentality of making people aware that you see problems. Ideally, you see lots of problems or opportunities, you're good at understanding their root causes and sources if they are problems, or understanding the fulcra of meeting opportunities
How?
in the positive. And then that you are really good at prioritization and valuing across this portfolio of opportunities, because now people will see, oh, you're not just the guy that invisibly gets shit done. You're the guy that sees problems other people don't. You're the guy that understands their root causes and where the opportunities are. You're the guy that understands efficient problem solving, and you're the guy that understands actual resource allocation across all the different potential things you could spend time on. That is a hell of a brand. Does that help you?
It does. And it actually spurs a few questions because one, I do come from an analytics background, so I don't know if you meant to catch that or not. So totally get that. I'm an analyst turned PM. And I do understand the advice of, people think that the work will speak for itself, not in today's days and age. So totally get that part. The two questions that come to mind, one is about brand. So you talked about, having your own brand and what you're known for. But I was chatting with another person from Sidebar yesterday, Lauren, about the difference between brand versus branding. Right? Brand is who you are, whereas branding is what you show to others. So would love to kind of get some thoughts on that. And the other one was when you were talking about selling yourself. I was trying to like mentally reconcile between selling yourself and executive presence, as they call it. Right? If you're the seller, then are you putting yourself kind of like as the guy who's always selling, but you're not the one kind of showing that presence of, hey, I have a decision versus selling. So would love to contrast both of these.
Yeah. Let's start with the second. So in the course, I kind of use the metaphor when you're selling yourself, when you sell anything, there's a product side and there's an influence side of the sale. And the product side of a sale kind of answers the question of quality. What am I selling and how good is it? So, Vic, you're a great guy. What you're selling is really good. And a mantra that I actually share with sales teams when I do meet with sales teams is when you're selling a great product, sales is an act of compassion. When you're selling a bad product, sales is a predatory act. People have scrambled their mind into believing that all sales is predatory. Right? You make the assumption, oh, this person's trying to get something from me. That's why they're selling. No, you have problems. This product will solve your problems. You're welcome. Oh, and by the way, it's not free. Right? So that's really important confidence building paradigm to get in your mind that Vic, you are an outstanding product to sell as a human being, and then your ideas are outstanding products to sell. So when you're selling, these people will actually feel very grateful that you are selling, right? That's the part to remember. If you feel that you're being predatory because you're trying to convince them of something, that's a very different mentality to bring to the table than bring the mentality of, oh, I'm super helpful to you. I am undiscovered to you. You discovering me will be something that you're grateful for. It's good for all of us. So that it may seem a little kind of abstract and less tactical to think about it that way, but you're not going to get the tactics right if your brain is not on this channel underneath the surface of understanding I'm genuinely helpful, I'm genuinely well-intentioned, I'm genuinely talented, etc. And like you mentioned, being from a data background, there are a lot of people from a data background that say, I'm here to answer people's questions. You just tell me what you need. Wrong thesis. Because what happens next? You wait, a question comes in, and what do most data professionals say? Boy, that's a super dumb question. So, what you need to be in the business of is helping people ask much smarter questions. Because if you're going to judge their question once you get it, why aren't you increasing the odds that the questions are good questions and a good use of the resourcing instead of now obligating yourself to answer dumb questions because you said that's what I'm here to do? So there's just kind of an underlying mentality and philosophy to bring to the table to start with, and that's really critical. The first thing you mentioned, remind me again what that was.
It is brand versus branding.
Brand versus branding. Yeah. So I am really I like to walk on eggshells when I get around words that are dangerous. The word brand is not dangerous, and I'll head right for it. It's a very real thing. It's something you should be hyper aware of. It exists in other people's heads, and you need to be proactive at sculpting people's brand in your head, in their heads, so that it's accurate. Now, manipulative people will sculpt it so it's inaccurate. And the problem that you will have in a large organization where there's competitive talent is that you'll have a lot of people proactively putting inaccurate pictures in people's minds. You are passively allowing inaccurate things to form. And now in the mental competition between who we promote, who do we choose for the project, who do we acknowledge, who has the elevated brand, you're up against, you've got a very unfair game that's being played, right? So you have to be proactive at getting an accurate brand in people's heads so that it competes with the inaccurate ones. Then we add those shared experiences in that time to the formula. And what happens is people's brands go, oh, wait, Vic was telling the truth the whole time. These other guys were telling not the truth the whole time. All the scales tilt in the right direction. Branding, on the other hand, is a hyper dangerous word. Because if I tell somebody do branding, there is a 99% chance they will do something preposterously stupid. So what we want to think about is just get focused on getting an accurate brand, understanding how to tell your story, focusing on that act of compassion of selling yourself as a very valuable human being. And we can talk a little bit more about knowing just how valuable and how differentiated you are. But there are a lot of people in Sidebar that I met at the conference who are really valuable, really differentiated because, excuse me, because they're really valuable and they don't really know it. They don't really know it. They haven't parsed their value into something easily articulated or even held as in the concept of self-worth. So you really have to get through these underlying barriers, and then the concept of branding will be a totally natural thing that you do the right way instead of you thinking about branding itself without doing the underlying deep work and then saying, crazy stuff. It's like people that get up that don't know how to do stand-up comedy, try to do stand-up. That's what branding makes people do. Like get on a microphone as a presenter. It's the same thing when you teach public speaking. When you remember, most public speakers, their biggest problem is they're worried about how stupid they'll look. And if that is adding cognitive load to your brain while you're speaking, you will look stupid. You will guarantee that fate. If instead you realize this audience is hungry for insights that I can share with them and I'm helping them, you can get really focused on the audience instead and that underlying deep work. So when you hear these speaking coaches, they're like, open with a joke. Well, if you haven't done the deep work of knowing that you're there to help, then you're going to open with a joke in the spirit of trying to not look stupid, and it's going to be the dumbest joke anybody's ever heard. The whole auditorium is going to be silent. You're going to clear your throat and move to slide 2. So, does that make sense to distinguish?
It does. And it's really helpful to think about it that way, that yes, there's kind of a before after. That unless you know who you are, you don't know how to pitch yourself slash sell yourself slash actually put in the visible work, which leads to kind of, I guess, the final summary question of what is your brand, right? How do you define what your brand is? Is it thinking conversation to conversation that, hey, I'm talking to person X, I really want them to take away these 3 takeaways about me or my ideas? Or is it a more holistic thing about, I stand for get shit done, problem solver, being genuine and honest? Like, which direction do you go in establishing your brand?
Yeah, so what a brand actually is in a person's head is a predictive algorithm. That's what it actually is. So it's when you come to mind, what predictions occur. And the major predictions professionally are about ability. So I will predict this person's efficacy at a thing. That's what you want them to be able to predict accurately. So when you're a product professional, analytics professional, part of you selling yourself and branding with other people is making sure they actually know the catalog of things that you can do and will succeed at. And then through the shared experiences, they build evidence of that in their mind. The second thing the brain will predict is risk level or trust. To the brain, when people try to define trust, you may notice they get pretty klutzy with the definition. They use the words a lot. Trust is like that's a shortcut to I don't really know how to define this. What's really happening in the human brain is when a brain has high degrees of trust, the brain wants to share access and information with that person. So think of like a relationship between a therapist and a patient. It's a high trust thing, knowing if I tell you things I would never tell anybody else, it's to my benefit. That's what trust is in the positive side. Trust in the negative side is if I tell you something that I would tell everybody else, you're going to hurt me more than anybody else would with that information. So you're regulating the flow of information access delegation on the basis of trust. And that's another prediction that a brain will make. So you need to make sure a brain understands when you give me information access, what will happen and how safe you will be. The third prediction is about appeal, which is, will I enjoy talking to Vic? Or will I feel like I'm in the dentist chair? And those are the three predictions you want them to have an accurate prediction of. And this is especially tough. And I'm glad you brought up the data professional thing, because it's helpful as a case study to look at data professionals and just how hard it is as a data professional to get ability, trust, and appeal all accurate in a person's mind. To have a person trust a data professional is extremely hard. And for people to find a conversation about data appealing is extremely hard. But if you find these amazing data professionals, what are they doing? Everybody's like, I love working with them. Even when we're talking about difficult conversations, they make it totally safe. And they just find a way to say things in such a way that we enjoy the experience. So those are the three aspects that you're building in the predictive engine.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really helpful framework to think of. So, since we're just about to take this away, any last recommendation you have on maybe a practical way to think about this? Like, I understand the criteria, but I'm not sure how to actually implement this next. So, yeah, maybe you can take away with that.
Um, I mean, it's so different for everybody. But let's look at the shared experiences separately from that heavy block of like a stated brand. The heavy block of a stated brand would be a lunch meeting, an introduction. You mentioned org design changes. There's always a bunch of meetings to meet people as part of that. Now, in that meeting, you need to have an actual kind of, not a script necessarily, but a few ideas in your head to be really crisp, bottom line, like Akshaya said, about here's what I do from an ability perspective. From a information and trust perspective, I understand there's a lot of information that has to stay with me. Here's what's going to happen. And then from an appeal perspective, I produce these types of reports, rankings. If I need questions answered, here's how I'll do all the stuff that I'm going to do in an appealing way. And then you need these shared experiences to follow where you can exemplify these things. And as you get used to this, just have this mental checklist ready and say, okay, I'm about to send an email. How much ability is shown in this email? How much trust is shown in this email? How much appeal is shown in this email? Next, I'm delivering a presentation next Tuesday. How much ability shows up in this? How much trust shows up in this? How much appeal? And you're smart enough just with that kind of pre-flight checklist to be like, oh, this slide is the least appealing slide in the deck. Let me make it better. That checklist gets you there, and then you build this muscle, and it becomes very natural.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Like, essentially, in an elevator pitch, use these three kind of bullets to think through it every time versus, the typical sell pitch of, hey, I do this and this is, what I work on. What do you do? Think of these three. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great to meet you.
Amazing. Thank you, Vic. Lots of like transferable, like general skills. I am doing a quick time check here. We have Nate up next for the last and final live solve challenge. But what I wanted to precede you all with, I'm going to drop it in the chat. Just go ahead and give us feedback as this next solve kind of progresses. Again, we'll try and keep it to like 15 minutes. I think we have the time, and then we can always stack it on with Q&A at the end if we have the time. But this has been amazing. I love the depth. I love the actual challenges. I love the practicality of it, and hope you're all enjoying this as well. Okay, so Nate, over to you. Come on in.
Thank you. I
Hello.
appreciate the opportunity. Can you hear me
Yeah.
okay?
Yep.
Yes, we
Cool,
can.
cool. Well, lovely to speak with you, Evan. Is it possible that I can screen share over here? Yes, I just want to share something because it's going to make explaining this a whole lot easier. Can you guys see a couple of Venn diagram right now?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
cool.
can.
Okay.
So Nate, quick
Okay.
reminder,
Yep.
what line this? Keep it crisp, keep it tight so you get more as you explore in,
Yep.
you can kind of go in. Over to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm a fractional CFO. I work with early stage founders primarily in the e-commerce space. I've been at it for a little over a year now, and for most of that year, I've been kind of talking about myself and basically borrowing the sales template, if you will, that other fractional CFOs have already using, which is basically kind of talking about a lot of the stuff on the left-hand side of this diagram. More recently, I've pivoted and with a significant amount of success. Like my conversion rate on sales calls has gone through the roof. And I attribute a big part of that to kind of repositioning myself as I'm showing on this diagram here, which is yes, I can do CFO stuff, but that's really only the beginning. What you really need, Mr. or Mrs. Founder, is kind of a mentor and coach and to help hold your hand and walk you through what to do with all this information when it comes to actually, implementing and executing. So anyway, I've got this sales pitch side of things pretty much down now. In terms of my, well, at least I feel a lot better about it, I should say. The problem that I'm struggling with at the moment, and that I was keen to get your thoughts and input on, Evan, is how to kind of manifest and share this with other parts of my communications, like, my elevator pitch, the website, which I'm showing you now, which I don't really think does a great job of communicating the message from the sales deck. So I'm kind of looking for a bit of help and guidance on how to amplify this message and amplify what I feel like I'm doing a lot better in my one-to-one communications.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yeah, and I had a chance to go through the rest of that deck too.
Cool.
So in the Maven course of selling yourself and your ideas, we're back in that one now. I go through a few rules that apply to effective selling. And the first of those rules is that you're selling the outcome, not the inputs. Now, part of what you are showing us in this Venn diagram is a improvement to this rule, right? You were selling the inputs on the left, which people do know they need, right? Everybody knows at a certain point they need this kind of financial, ability, these
Yeah.
inputs of ability. But the outcomes answer the question of why do I really care about this? And even as you
Yeah.
go through your deck, there's two things that I noticed. One is, and I'm just trying to give you high candor feedback here, if hopefully that's helpful,
Please.
is I actually found it very difficult to follow the deck linearly, right, as a story arc. It starts with there are probably 3 or 4 main claims or messages that are not thematically tied together as you move to the slide that you showed us so far. So if we take that rule of starting with the outcomes instead of the inputs, figuring out what outcome this Venn diagram actually creates and how it's differentiated than the outcomes that are created from the typical people in the field is where it should begin. And then that thread should get pulled throughout as you unpack kind of how it really works and bringing it to life, showing that it's actually real. I think in your world, going back to what Michelle and I were talking about, you are in one of the heaviest patterns in the business world. When people hear the acronym CFO, there is no lack of clarity in their mind of what that means. And when you have this Venn diagram, you are getting fully out of a very deep rut of a pattern. So
Okay.
you have to depart that pattern hard, right?
Right.
How like it kind of like a phrase almost like how I'm the CFO that's not like a CFO kind of a thing, right?
Okay.
And because you want to do exactly what we talked about with Michelle, which is create safety in the good parts of the pattern, but then break the pattern productively so that you can differentiate with these people. And it's clear kind of in your services and things like that. It's good. There are some other kind of funny smoothing, irony things like you have a slide that says our happy customers, I believe, and then a photo is on the slide, and nobody in the photo looks happy. So that kind of does some funny
Yeah.
stuff like that. So
Yeah.
just all these little things matter so much because as you
Yeah.
think about a person's brain, patterns, 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 patterns. Like if you see a photo with actually happy people, that's a good pattern. If it's feeling a little empty, then the power of a
Uh-huh.
slide like that gets lost. If
Mm.
I'm having a hard time understanding the narrative and following it into that main headline point that you're making,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm sitting through the first 5 or 6 slides of that deck going, like, we need a CFO. This guy seems cool, but like, what are we talking about something different here? Are we talking about something similar here? I don't quite get it yet. And then you land
Mm.
that point late, and I think that's why your improvement that you've seen in conversion has skyrocketed, but it's
Mm-hmm.
actually not an A+ experience to get to the point where the magic occurs and that's the what's causal of that boost. Does that make sense?
Mm. It does. For what it's worth, some context on the numbers. Like previously, I was closing maybe 5 to 10% of prospects. I've closed 5 out of 5, 100% with the current version of that deck.
Excellent. Yeah. So I don't think there's a 6 out of 5 scenario here, but as time goes on, just smoothing that out, right? It's a very well conceived idea, and the
Mm.
execution can just be tightened up a little bit more. And the reason
Okay.
I think that's so important because you mentioned the challenge was transposing that from the deck to the website.
Yes.
It's the website will have needed that step of cleaning this deck up to have occurred first for the
Mm.
transposing to work best. Does
Okay.
it, right? So that way,
Yeah.
it's great that you're starting with artifact A before bringing it to artifact B, but get
Mm-hmm.
artifact A to really be crisp and clear. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just, as I look through it, it's just a handful of small things and kind of like a clearer claim at the beginning, a clearer tie-in to why, the four bubble chart exists and like, why am I showing you the things that I'm showing you? What claim is this actually tied into and backing up? Because it kind of feels
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit of like a house tour. Like, this is a really nice kitchen, and now we're going to take you to a really nice living room, and I'm going to take you to. So they
Mm.
feel like different rooms that I'm in as I'm moving through
Mm-hmm.
that narrative. I
Mm-hmm.
love the
Mm-hmm.
house, which is why you're 5 out of 5. But cleaning that up, if you want to transfer it to the website, will make it really
Yeah.
clear what is actually working.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and congrats on the success of that. It's awesome. But I think in terms of like selling yourself in this case, it would be answering the question, how am I, Nate, different than
Mm.
most people you're going to meet who do this?
Mm-hmm.
Get them sold on you and your mind and how your mind works differently and why that's why your service works differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not just your service that works differently, it's you. And they're going to work with you, especially in that mentor coach role.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then the other claim that was in there was I can just look at it real quick. Uh, most early stage founders don't need another voice telling them where the problems are. They already have enough of them already.
Mm-hmm.
I think that point is actually inverted from, I think a lot of founders would love help knowing where the problems are and what the financial view of those problems are. I think
Mm.
so. There are a bunch of little things in here that if you make that claim, then that point,
Mm.
this one point in particular now maps way more powerfully to, you've already got this solved. Well, no, you don't. You actually need that solved in a much more adult way than your stage normally has it solved. Does that make
Right. Yeah.
sense?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you
Yep.
bring claims like that over to the website, and now you've got this kind of 360 cohesion starting to take shape.
Mm.
But
Okay.
you've done a great job. I have to get nitpicky to give you feedback, and that's what nitpicky feedback looks
Mm.
like. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
do you think messaging or going to your point about like disrupting the pattern recognition, do you think saying or saying something along the lines of, hey, like I'm the anti-CFO. I don't want to give you more numbers. I want to give you less. I'm not here to throw data at you. I'm here to help you make decisions. Like, is that too confrontational?
Um, I mean, you can take something that's that harsh, you can back it off 10%, but somewhere in that on that playground is your answer. More than the
Hmm.
pattern match of like I'm a lot like other CFOs. That playground, it doesn't feel to me like it's who you are. You feel different.
Yeah.
And on that playground, you can have like a funny message, a playful message, a very kind of opinionated message. There's a bunch of variants. So like a playful
Mm.
message would be like something about how most CFOs are the business prevention department, right? Like the source of
Hmm.
no in
Yeah.
companies, notoriously. And like you can kind of play that theme a little bit. And what I'm sure you read the Secret CFO's newsletter. So he and I talk
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
lot kind of in the background about his uniqueness is rooted in truly understanding uh, this interaction that a company has with the market, not just the internals of a company. Because
Mm.
if CFOs get lost in optimizing for the company internally, they
Hmm.
do great harm to the relationship the company has externally with the market.
Mm.
And
Mm.
while well-intentioned founders, founders usually kind of have enough power to not deal with this, but even well-intentioned founders can often be met with a CFO that's kind of like, oh, this founder is such a moron. He wants to put our name on dirt bikes and whatever. And the truth is, the founder is also saying in the other room next door, like our CFO doesn't get it. They think we need to only do the most proven basic stuff, but we've got so many people that love that we do this, and
Mm.
it actually matters. So being the guy who actually gets it, like secret CFO is the guy who actually gets
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
massively
Hmm.
differentiating and refreshingly differentiating. It's a pattern break that people want.
Mm. That's really interesting.
So if you go back,
Okay.
if you and I connect offline, you might want to go back because he specifically dove into this topic of like understanding not just kind of the Excel view of the business, but the experiential view of the business, the innovation view, and those
Yes.
types of things. He's written specifically about that a few times, and it's really good kind of inspiration to borrow from in explaining how you exhibit similar behaviors.
Okay. Nice. I am on the newsletter. I'll go and see if I can find that one.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Fantastic. There were the brave souls. Thank you, Nate, and thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Vic. I thought this was a really interesting set of challenges and problems that kind of like went through the gamut. So I really appreciate you all. I'm going to do the thing and ask for feedback. I really appreciate people who've already done that. Thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple questions, but don't make me gate it. And I'm going to say only if you give me feedback and you actually ask a question, but that's not true. But we really, really do need some feedback. So thanks to everyone who's already done it. I just put the bit.ly link again, so it's easier for you to access it. But we'll take a couple questions. Evan, what do you think?
Yeah, sounds great.
Sounds great. Amazing. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Ida, I feel like you had something. So feel free to like be courageous and jump on.
Well, I can just jump on and say so many of my questions were the same as Vic's questions. So I was in a position where I had 3 CEOs in 5 years and had to prove myself, prove myself, prove myself. So that was pretty spot on for Vic's question, and then my experience, Evan, of your answer. And then my other question as a fractional CTPO now was really answered by Nathan in that understanding how to be that person on a website, right? How to create the safety and the interest and the trust and the persona when you're not face to face. Because I don't think I have that as a challenge face to face, but translating that into a website is really difficult. So I'm taking some of that feedback away from there, and I clearly have a lot more learning to do from you, Evan. So I'll probably start with your Lenny's podcast, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for saying all that, and would love to help however I can. When I explain myself to people, one of the first things that I explain is that, from a personality perspective, I have what you would call dysfunctionally high compassion, meaning that I get emotionally attached to helping people and their well-being very quickly. So I absolutely would love to help anybody any way I can. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Ida. Kia, you want to come on board and ask a question?
Yeah, I'm a similar archetype to Vic in that I'm the get shit done, don't really speak up person and recently had a experience where uh, I accepted a new offer, then came back to my employees and kind of discovered my value after the fact. How do I prevent that situation from happening? Um,
I mean, that's more their fault than yours, for sure. I'm a big fan of causal reasoning, meaning like there's a book called The Oz Principle, which some of you may have heard of, which insinuates that in any situation, you need to figure out how you own that situation. It's a useful thing, but there's a lot of dumb junk going on in the world around us too. Uh, I think the way we prevent it is it's rooted in culture, and to whatever extent you're in a position to influence culture, that's where it happens. If we do not, there's culture is very deeply misunderstood. Culture is rooted in what human beings believe. It's the assumptions they make going into things, and this kind of idea of what we tolerate and things like that, that all sits downstream of the behavioral choices that were made in the headwaters of culture. So when you want to affect culture, it's anchored in five beliefs. And this that does help you kind of sell yourself too. That the first belief is why we're even doing this. Like why, so just referencing Nate, like why is the world glad that Nate exists? Why is he even doing this? And if he hires anybody else and wants to kind of put them, set the standard for the way we act and the choices we make, why we're even doing this is kind of the mother standard to set, which is we create CFO-ish experiences for people that go well beyond the typical experience, that can see things that other people don't, et cetera. And that standard now is set for, oh, if I'm tempted to do something very typical, I'm going to instead follow something atypical, but productively atypical. Other standards have to do with how we treat each other, the quality of the decisions we make, the quality of our output, the definition of done. Like, is an email done when it's sent, or is it done when it actually helps a person, right? And most teams have a lot of mental belief brokenness about these things. So as you go influence the organization, you'd start with things like the definition of done is when it actually has the intended effect and a person feels as though it was helpful. Our quality standard is here, our so and so is here. And what you're doing is you're like churning the bottom of a you're kind of churning up the sediment of culture that is rested at the bottom and people just take it for granted. And as people become more aware and intentional about these beliefs, someone like you now shines within that context, right? You map to these quality standards, to how you treat people, to our purpose, to this. And our purpose is outside of the organization. It's why is the world glad we exist? That's what we're fulfilling. Our purpose is not why are our shareholders glad we exist. So if you are really good, a clear thinker about why the world is glad that you exist, then you can maximize shareholder return by making the world ultra glad that you exist and rewarding you for your existence. As you demonstrate your own authentic ability with a more, let's kind of call it like the dimmer switch of culture is so low that you can't even see this stuff going on. But if you turn the dimmer switch of culture up, it illuminates the people that are most aligned with this cultural stuff. Does it make sense? I know I'm
makes a,
trying to fit an answer in into
yeah, it
just
makes a
a
ton of
couple
sense.
minutes. Okay,
I
good.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. That hour went by so quickly. I don't know if you all thought so, but I definitely did. Evan, thank you so much for always being so generous and being dysfunctionally compassionate about helping the sidebar crew, because I do know and I've seen proof that it's true. So you've won crust from my perspective, at least. But thank you so much. Thanks everyone for engaging. I appreciate all of your challenges. You do not have to stop the learning here. Evan's available on every tech social platform that you can think of. So feel free to reach out to him both through Sidebar, not outside Sidebar. If I can support with anything, please let me know. Also happy to make warm intros. Evan, you may be getting a lot of emails, so I'm happy to do that. Uh,
happy to open them. Yep.
amazing, amazing. Thanks everyone. Such a pleasure.
Thanks, Evan.
Yes,
Take
and
care.
please make sure you give feedback if you want more sessions like these, because I feel like we all had a great time. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So yeah. It's funny, all the note takers that
I
existed.
know, it's just the note takers now. Yeah, I think we're mostly there. Maybe Vic. Vic needs to leave. Bye, Vic. Uh,
Vic was such a great dude.
yeah. Oh my
Everything
God,
was.
he's
Yeah,
amazing. He's amazing.
yeah.
This was so much fun. I feel like a lot of people really enjoyed it.
I hope so. Yeah, it's like these are deep problems. You can
Yes.
throw some icing on the surface, but if you
Yes.
really fix them deeper, then it's
Yeah.
better.
Which I think is the other thing. I like that Vic was pushing you for like, what are some tactical things? Like, you got to solve the real problems though. Like, you can't just gloss over and get like shortcuts to everything, which I think is a good push. Um, but this is amazing. I'm glad it worked out. Like, I feel like we could have, I mean, I think it was well formatted. At least I kind of was
Yeah, yeah. Felt that way.
effortlessly execution. You did great. Amazing. Whatever I hear back, Evan, I will pass it along.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I will do that. I'm going to get a little bit more. I got at least like 6 or 7 people who I think gave feedback. I'm going to push for a little bit more in like post-event stuff. I try to be abnormally annoying, but I will be because I think we're trying something different, and I want to make
Yeah.
sure that if you don't give feedback, shit doesn't change. Like, you got to own it. Like, you got to do the hard things. And
Exactly right.
so I'll push people to like just take the first step
Perfect.
and not be like so cautious about it. And then I'll stay in touch. I'm gonna go back to
All
my
right.
website.
Have a great rest of week in New York.
Thank you. You too. Bye,
All
Evan.
right, talk soon. See you.
Bye.